Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this Getting to Know CapsimInbox Human Resources version. As Human Resources is our pilot pass featured version for the month of March. My name is Akil, and I'm a business development manager here at Capsim, and I'm also joined with Dr. Robert Portnoy, who's the professor of human resources management at Washington University in St. Louis, and the author of Human Resources, CapsimInbox version. And today, what we plan on doing is really initially giving you upfront information on what this version experience entails for the students, and then take a deeper dive into the CapsimInbox platform itself, why we built it, what it looks like, and what are the outputs of that. And at that point, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Portnoy to take a deeper dive into the human resources version he created and really get the reasoning why he created it and the goals behind the storyline, the goals behind the deep dive of his human resources version. Then after that, really opening it up to questions, question answer phase. And really at that point, all participants can add their questions into the chat feature of this GoToMeeting webinar. But again, thank you again. And with that, I'll move on to the next slide of what is this experience. This is a 60-minute activity that puts students in the role of a vice president of human resources at an aerospace company. So fictional company, Chorson Propulsion Technologies, a large company, and as VP of Human Resources, students will be responding to emails from the CEO, their direct reports in HR, customers, suppliers, and employees. And while they're responding to these emails, they will be evaluated on the skills of talent acquisition and development, ethics and compliance, compensation and benefits, performance management, labor relations, and safety. So, but what is CapsimInbox itself? So CapsimInbox is a self-driven activity that puts students in a professional role and assesses quantitative and qualitative skills while they respond to emails that and / scenarios that show up in their inbox. And after that, after they respond to these emails, they will receive immediate feedback pertaining to the skills that were assessed, as well as the opportunity for remediation and a remediation activity that walks them through the individual development plan. We're going to take a closer look at what that means here. So we're going to take a deeper dive into what the student will see and what the professor will have access to as well. So from here, this is the initial student dashboard that they will see when they first walk in. What we're looking at here is actually a different version. We're looking at our general management version as an example of what their experience will be. But the student experience will follow this ribbon across the top. So they'll have a welcome screen, then they'll go through a quick self-assessment, they'll get some context on their role, go through a quick rehearsal, and then enter the inbox. So right here, we're at the welcome screen. Pretty straightforward. They're looking at they'll be able to see a high-level video, really acclimating them or getting them prepared for what's to come down the line of this inbox experience. So from here, they'll take a quick self-assessment. So again, in the general management version of Inbox, we assess these skills of organizing, leading, problem solving, communicating, and initiating. This gives the students the opportunity to really pull this cursor across this 0 to 100 scale, really based on how comfortable do they feel with this particular skill. And then, so pretty quick, they'll do this for the other skills, and that's their initial skill assessment, self-assessment. So moving on from there, they will jump into their role, getting more context on what role they will be acting as in this environment. So in this particular environment, they're director of sales and operations for the Midwest region for a tooling company. So getting some more content around their role as to who directs, who reports to them, who do they report to, some more company history, what are the values of the company, products, org chart of the company. So they'll take some time to digest this information before they move forward into the actual environment. From here, they'll do a quick rehearsal, really acclimating them to the dashboard itself. So, replicates our typical email, Outlook email. Initially, they'll have a welcome email for them to read and walk through, and they'll be able to see that they have an org chart or some company info over to the left that they can reference, and then this email will require a response. Once they've done that, so just 2 emails there, they'll move on to the inbox itself. And now they're entered the actual inbox. What we'll see here is that a timer at the top of this dashboard will be counting down from 60 minutes and really serving as an added pressure for the students that we all feel as professionals of we have this amount of time to complete these amount of tasks. And as well as this inbox will be inundated with about 45 emails, or a good number of emails that will require their response. They'll be directed towards them, and they can respond. So they'll be able to read the context of the email and choose the best response and move forward. They'll also receive chat features from colleagues. Some of these will be pertinent chats from colleagues asking real professional questions. Others will serve as distractions for the students while they go through this experience. So from there, after they go through, respond to all of these emails, they can receive immediate feedback after they go through that. And the feedback is going to start broad and drill down. So it's going to give them a score on their overall performance. Then dive down into development index, also providing a self-awareness score. But most importantly, they'll be able to see a skill gap score dashboard, really reminding them where they put themselves in the self-assessment, and then letting them know based on their responses where the inbox assessment puts them in this particular skill. So in some cases, this will be a self boosting activity for this particular skill. So I put myself at 10, and organizing the inbox puts me at 50. In other cases, it'll be an indication of room for improvement. I put myself at 60 for leading, inbox has me at 20, and so on and so forth. We can take a look at these gaps, whether negative or positive. But what do we do with that information? Many assessments will leave students with that information of you were strong in these areas, you're weaker in these other areas. Have fun with that information. Here, we walk them through an individual development plan, a remediation activity, which is going to start with another welcome video, another 1.5-minute high-level video of what's to come. Below that, they'll be able to see developmental tactics, as well as their skills listed out, not only by skill score, but also by development need. And they can pick and choose which skill they choose to develop or they pursue to build upon. And clicking on this improve button will, one, give them our definition or the author's definition of that particular skill, as well as developmental activities or tactics they can pick and choose from to implement in their day-to-day life to build or expand on that skill. And doing so will flesh out their individual development plan. They can go and do that for other skills that were assessed in this particular dashboard and particular experience. And this individual development plan is something that they can download and walk away with for their self-development. So pretty quick 60-minute activity typically. The professor or the instructor will also have access to these scores. So what we're looking at here is the instructor dashboard, where they will be able to see a class average, also broken down by score, and also be able to see the students' overall score, their self-awareness score, if they completed the individual development plan and the ability to view that. And this is downloadable to CSV. They can also see the skill scores as well. Also downloadable to a CSV if needed for data assurance of learning or anything along those lines. But yeah, that is a quick overview of what the dashboard looks like for the participant and the administrator. So at this point, switch back over to the presentation here and actually begin to hand it over to our author, Dr. Portnoy. So Dr. Portnoy is a professor of human resources management at the Olin School of Business, Washington University of St. Louis, and has over 27 years of teaching experience, but also has corporate experience as well. So president and chief learning officer at the Learn to Present Academy, learning and development specialist at Boeing between 2005 to 2013. Also a senior professional in human resources, so Shrm certified. So Dr. Portnoy, thank you again for taking time to speak with us and dive deeper into this human resources activity. We would love to just hear more on why you created this, how you created this, and why, and your goals behind it.
Thank you, Akil. Next slide, please.
Yes.
So, hi, everybody. I want to welcome you on behalf of Capsim and also Washington University, Olin Business School in St. Louis. It's a beautiful day here in St. Louis. We're now at 65 degrees, bright sunshine, and I hope where you are, you're enjoying the beginning of spring as well. So I do teach at Washington U in the Olin Business School, and the course that the simulation, the inbox, is based on is a course that I not only teach, but I actually took when I was doing my master's degree in human resources at Washington University. And I have to say that when I took the course, I would describe it really the teaching method as a traditional approach to human resource management instruction. And I would go from the class back to my work at Boeing into HR and really didn't see any kind of strong connection on a one-to-one basis as far as what I was doing in HR because it was textbook based. And I would say at that time, I really was committed that if I ever had the opportunity to teach the course, that I wanted to make it much more real world based. Well, as it turned out, the year after I got my master's degree in HR, I was invited by the dean of the Olin Business School out to lunch, and we got to know each other a little bit. I came from Boeing, and he wanted to know a little bit about what was going on at the company, and I shared with him. And then he actually offered me the opportunity to teach this course, and I was honored. So I went back to my own VP at Boeing, and I said, hey, here's the opportunity. Can I use some flex time to go on over and teach the course? And Boeing was thrilled to have the opportunity to have visibility at Washington University, a very prestigious university all over the world, recognized for it, and particularly in business. And the VP supported and continued to support over my years of teaching the opportunity. So I was thrilled. That said, I wanted to really make the course more for my students than what it was for me, because the textbook approach, and I did and continue to use a textbook. It's by Gary Dessler, and it's called simply Human Resource Management. But it's going to give you the foundational knowledge and theories, but it won't give you the opportunity to really make critical decisions in real time that will cause you and prepare you to take decisive action. So from early on, I wanted to make this course bring the real world of HR into the classroom as realistically as I could. Well, one of the things that's happened in the last several years in HR as we've moved from a personnel function to more of a strategic, guiding, and tactical function, is to look at HR as a profession. And yet, in its earliest origins, it was viewed as an administrative function, as a personnel function. What really was the tipping point and that made the difference was, next slide, please. Akil, thank you, was the SHRM competency model. And I wanted to use that competency model really as a foundation for everything that I would teach within the course. But once again, if you look at this model, it can be looked upon as a foundational set of concepts. I wanted to bring immersion into the way I taught the course to really bring the opportunity for people to experience the real world of HR, where they face all kinds of challenging problems in real time. I wanted them to be challenged by issues that would fly at them while they're under some degree of pressure. And they would need to make decisions about best solutions to different kinds of problems that they were facing. Question is, how would I do that? So I began to think about my own work in terms of the day and the life of an HR representative, where a fellow executive may approach me and request a job placement for a particular individual, which would be a favor to him, for example, breaching professional protocols, potentially violating procedures, and even displaying favoritism. So what's the HR practitioner to do? And how can fairness be ensured in light of the expectation from a senior executive to follow a directive or to do them a favor? It's a real world kind of challenge. Or there might be a union organizing campaign in the parking lot of the company where we work. What do we do? Do we allow the union to influence our workers to vote? Or do we interfere with that because we don't think a union organizing campaign and ultimately a union contract would be good for the company? What are our rights as HR representatives and company representatives? And how can we best support our company and employees to make the best decisions? So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to create real world challenges that I faced every day and my colleagues faced every day and make it come alive in an HR course. So again, my objective was to really try to make it what it would be like as an HR practitioner, almost like for anyone who's flown a flight simulator where you're in a cockpit. Well, in this case, what I wanted to create was putting the participant here behind the controls of human resources in a way that they're not going to do any damage, but they're going to experience what those pressures and the outcomes of those pressures, good decisions, not so good decisions, what the outcomes could be like, so that the decisions anyone would make in a simulation like this that I would want to create could impact the company, and decisions that would require a lot of thought and decisive action. So that was my intention when Capsim approached me. Next slide, please. So where would these real world experiences or real world situations and circumstances come from? Next slide, Akil. And I thought, well, I have all this experience in HR, and I've lived these challenges and pressures on a day-to-day basis. So what if I would develop this HR inbox based on actual experiences that happened to me and my colleagues? So that's what I want to do now. I want to tell you about some of those experiences. Next slide, please. The first one is what I'll call the deacon. So here's a real situation where the CEO of the company went to church with his wife every Sunday and developed a good working relationship and friendship with the deacon of his church. And this deacon was warm and gracious and really reached out to people, and the CEO thought, this man would make a great leader in HR. And so I'm going to approach him and I'm going to ask him if he would be interested in becoming the next VP of HR. So the CEO did. And the deacon at first he was taken aback. I mean, how could I be a VP of HR? I mean, I'm trained as a minister. But the CEO had a lot of confidence in him and basically talked him into it. And this deacon became our next VP of HR. Well, if we had the opportunity to really interact with one another during our brief time together, I would ask you, how do you think this worked out? Somebody coming in with really good people skills, but no background. And look on the right again at the SHRM competencies. No background in ethical practices or HR expertise or business acumen or critical evaluation, leadership and navigation, nothing. He was a minister. And the results were catastrophic. A lot of careers were destroyed as a result, and a lot of very serious complications ensued as a result of somebody being at the controls of HR who had no business being at the controls of HR. He was not trained as an HR professional. After all, that's what the SHR competencies did for us. They helped us develop a brand as a professional organization, whereas before we were not recognized as such. So here's the first situation that I thought of, something I lived through, something I was affected by, a situation called the deacon. Next slide, please. Well, where is the deacon going to get people to fill positions? And one of the positions that he needed to fill was to become a leader in the brand new leadership training institute that he wanted to create. So who would he want to identify? And he figured that he knew a test pilot well who worked for the company. And if a test pilot can face all the challenges and all the fears and all the issues that would come up in testing a brand new airplane, how great would that person be as a leader in the Leadership Institute? Now, I don't know if he thought about this, our VP of HR, the deacon, but there is a book called In Extremis Leadership, Leading as If Your Life Depended on It, by Thomas A. Kolditz. And so there's a certain amount of rationale to putting a test pilot to be the leader of leaders in the Leadership Institute, because that person has faced extreme challenges in his work as a test pilot, and prior to that in his work as a military commander. Well, how do you think this worked out? Again, another catastrophe. Now, I didn't realize it at the time because this was some years ago, but this leader of the Leadership Institute crumbled under pressure. He was probably suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome, which at the time we probably didn't even recognize. It probably hadn't even been named as a disorder, and yet he crumbled. So we've got two circumstances coming out of experiences that I faced and was involved in and was affected by on a day-to-day basis of decisions that were made to put people in place who never should have been in those positions. Next slide, please, Akil. Well, this company that I worked for actually was acquired by another company, and I was in the role of an executive in a director level position. I was paid as such. I had executive compensation, including stock options. But when the company I was working for merged with another company, the position that I was occupying was the same position that was occupied by another director in the acquiring company. And there wasn't room for both of us. And because I was part of the company that was merged, I needed to be moved down from my executive position to a management position. And my coworker, who did the exact same work as me, also was a manager. And yet, my pay was not reduced. Her pay remained the same as what it was. So where's the fairness in that? And how do you deal with that kind of inequity? So this is just a sampling of the experiences that I thought, you know what, I could develop. Next slide, please, Akil. I could develop, based on these kinds of experience, at least 30 items that would fill up an inbox, that would have pop-up messages adding to the urgency. And so with that in mind, that's how I created the HR inbox. It was fun. It still continues to be fun. And it really does form an important structure and framework within the Introduction to Human Resources course that I teach. Because once again, it satisfies the objective of bringing real world experiences through these items and these pop-up messages into the Introduction to Human Resource Management class. So that's where it came from. Next slide, please. So what I developed was a fictitious company that Akil talked about. I named it Torsion Propulsion Technologies. This is a company that produces not airplanes as a full frame tube that people sit in with wings attached, but rather focusing only on jet engines and jet engine performance to make them the most reliable, safest jet engines in the world. And that's its vision and its mission. Next slide, please. So the company, and Akil had a slide earlier, has 10,000 people and a fully functioning human resources organization. Here's a little bit of the org chart. The CEO is Matthew Milson. VP of Marketing is Teresa. Her last name is not on here. The VP of Engineering is Mike Jensen. Next slide, please. And you who are completing the inbox, you are the VP of HR. So all of the items in the inbox are going to be addressed to you. Next slide, please. Reporting to you are 6 people, 6 directors. Left, Talent Acquisition, Roger Wentmore. Director of Ethics and Compliance, McKelsey Venner. Director of Performance Management, Sally Strupp. Director of Talent Development, Mitzi Paulson. Director of Compensation and Benefits, Tara Cartwright. And Director of Labor Relations and Safety, Ken Saperstein. So you see, you have a full complement of HR functions reporting to you, each with a director, so executive level, all looking to you for guidance and leadership. Next slide, please. So what are you faced with when you enter the inbox? Well, as Akil said, your inbox is filled with, I think in our case, we have 30 different items for you to respond to in your time. So you have 60 minutes with the clock ticking down. So there's some degree of urgency as you're looking at each one of these. But as we glance down the line, next slide, please. We've got an email from the CEO, Matt Milson. Now that should get your heart pumping a little bit. What does Matt Milson want from me? Next slide, please. Well, here's the actual item. Now you can see it's coming from Matt Milson to you, the VP of HR. Hey, Sally and I just got back from church and we had the pleasure of meeting our new deacon, Clancy Finney. Next slide, please. Recognize this? So this is based on the situation that I described earlier. It's a true set of circumstances. Next slide, please. Deacon Finney is serving our congregation on a part-time basis, and he asked me to be on the lookout for a counseling position at our company, and we could tell right away that the deacon was warm, welcoming, gracious, and a great listener with a kind and understanding ear. Next slide, please. So do me a favor and find a position for him, maybe an ethics advisor or something he can do in our employee assistance program. He'll be great, and I'll remember you for this one. So what to do? The CEO has sent you an email asking you to find a position for the deacon in the company. Next slide, please. So what are the choices? Well, we could tell Mitzi Paulson to find a position for Mr. Finney. Next slide, please. who's Mitzi Paulson? So we go back within the inbox to the org chart, and we can find out that Mitzi Paulson is the Director of Talent Development. Now that's curious. Next slide, please, Akil. Why would an option be to go to Mitzi Paulson, who's in talent development rather than talent acquisition? So the person filling this out needs to think that through, because this simulation is now throwing them a curve. Why go to talent acquisition? Why go to training? Why go to talent development? So this is beginning to put some ambiguity in a situation that's going to cause perhaps some pressure, some uncertainty, some thinking through what's going on here. Second choice, tell Mitzi Paulson to invite Mr. Finney for an interview. Well, this is interesting. So now if we choose this one, we're telling because we have line authority over Mitzi Paulson, who's a director, we're the VP of HR. Sit down with Mr. Finney, interview him. Well, is that a good idea? Third choice, contact Mr. Finney and invite him for an interview with you. So here we are as the VP of HR. The choice is for us to get in touch with Mr. Finney, bypass talent acquisition entirely, and have him come for an interview with us. Next choice, refer Mr. Finney to the job postings on our website. Well, that's interesting. I mean, look up at the top. How will you respond to, quote unquote, a favor from your CEO? We're going to bypass our organization entirely, where Mr. Finney can come in and have interviews, and tell him to just go to the job postings on our website. How's the CEO going to feel about that? And then finally, tell Mike, who's Mike? Well, if we would look at the org chart again, we would see that Mike is the VP of engineering. Why would we go to the VP of engineering now and tell him to work directly with Mitzi? So we're sending him back to talent development to find a position for Mr. Finney. So these choices aren't necessarily very clear, and they could potentially cause the person filling them out to become confused, to go back to the org chart, to try to think things through. But again, faced with ambiguity, uncertainty, which leads to pressure, which leads to, again, the urgency of time, because the time is ticking away. So what's the best answer? Next slide, please. Well, in the background, the foundation for this HR inbox is the 5 HR core functions that Akil had talked about earlier. We've got talent acquisition and development. We have ethics and compliance. We have compensation and benefits. We have performance management. We have labor relations and safety. Ideally, you, in responding to the CEO's request, could think through what's the best answer in light of those 5 options, in light of the core functions that I'm likely being measured against. And at this point, I probably don't know that these are the HR core functions because they're in the background. This is the framework for the inbox. But if we think about it, and if we are filling this out from an HR perspective, which one of these options that we went through would really be informed by the HR core functions? Next slide, please. Probably talent acquisition and development. What does SHRM competencies tell us with respect to HR expertise in terms of how we could best answer this question? Next slide, please. Are there ethical issues if we bypassed, for example, the company rules and procedures? And so thinking back or thinking into these HR core functions could help to lead us into the best answer. Next slide, please. which would be refer Mr. Finney to the job postings on our website. That's what the competencies would tell us to do. That's what the core functions would tell us to do. And taking this HR inbox for the first time, we may not realize that. After all, what's happening is we're being approached through an email from our CEO for a favor. Do we have the guts? Do we have the grit? Do we have the courage to stand up and do what's right based on our profession, what we know about our profession, based on our own HR rules, policies, and procedures to do the right thing, despite the pressure coming from the CEO? If that is not a real world challenge, what is? We all face it. And here it is in this inbox item in the inbox. Next slide, please. So once we respond to all of the 30 items in the inbox, along with all the chat messages that come through, we're going to get a score. And Akil referred to it earlier, but here is the feedback. And you can see if you were to get 100%, your overall performance was 100th percentile. This overall score is based on how accurately you responded to the emails and messages during the exercise. The score is a percentile, which shows your overall performance relative to the CapsimInbox database. Score of 100th percentile means that you performed higher than 100% of the individuals in the database. Well, what's this based on? You can see your score is based on the HR core functions of talent acquisition and development, ethics and compliance, compensation and benefits, performance management, and labor relations and safety. So not only is this inbox competency-based, it's also performance-based. It's real world, it's challenging. These situations are going to fly at you. You're going to be faced with ambiguity and uncertainty, and your way through it is to think through your response based on HR core functions. And that was the framework and the impetus for constructing the inbox. Next slide, please. You will get a report, or the participant will get a report going over the scores themselves in terms of how you did your self-assessment, as Akil demonstrated, and your actual scores based on your performance in the inbox. And then what you're going to see is about 15 pages in the appendix of what we call developmental tactics. These are 3 to 4 pages of background on each one of these HR core functions. So if you do less well than you hoped you had in talent acquisition and development, you go into this mini course in the appendix to really give you the conceptual, the theoretical, the competency background about talent acquisition and development. Is it designed to replace the textbook? No. Is it designed to replace the SHRM competency model? No. But it does provide a really solid set of background information into each one of these core functions. Next slide, please. So I give the HR inbox as an assignment for a pre-course assessment and a post-course assessment. So we're about a third of the way into the semester. So around 3-4 weeks ago, all my students, and there are 37 of them, they took the HR inbox as a pre-assessment. And following their assessment and reading their report and going through the appendix, they were given the assignment to write a 5 to 7 page report on what they learned from their experience in the HR inbox. Here's a sampling of what they said. Next slide. The CapsimInbox assessment gave me valuable insight into strategies for improving my skills in every area, as well as the valuable insight into my understanding of my own skills. Capsim also allows me to plan ahead and create real scheduled goals I can use to fully develop myself. I plan to develop my skills by studying the definitions and laws and regulations in ethics and compliance, as well as labor relations and safety. And I plan to utilize the additional resources. So that's a quote from one of my students in their report that completed that assignment. Next slide, please. The HR microsimulation has given me a new perspective on human resources management. My biggest takeaway from the CapsimInbox human resources microsimulation is that to succeed in human resources management, I must continually challenge employees to perform in the strategic direction of the company's mission statement. In other words, and I'm paraphrasing here, but everything I do as an HR practitioner needs to support what the company's trying to achieve. Next slide, please. Finally, this simulation allowed me to understand what a job in HR may look like. Wow, when I read that, I thought, it's working. While I've always heard of an HR department and utilized them for onboarding through my internships, I never realized everything that it encompassed. It's given me a greater appreciation of HR as a problem solver of the organization and made it much clearer what responsibilities may be prevalent if I decide to take this career path. So there are 3 examples of what students said. There were many, many, many more that spoke to the value of the inbox, and it was very rewarding to me, not only to see that the HR inbox was doing what I had intended it to do, but to witness the value of it that these students were reporting on in their assessments. So how do I feel about all this? Next slide, please. I'm a happy professor. So with that, Akil, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. And with that, we have been, the platform itself has been picking up recognition over the past year as it gained a EdTech Award in Trend Setting 2020, EdTech Award as the Cool Tool winner in 2020, Professional Skills and Solution. The Brandon Hall Group, it picked up 2 golds, one for Best Advanced Gaming or Simulation Technology, and also Best Advanced Content Authoring Technology for the Capsim authoring platform, which is really the structure at which this inbox was built. So allowing content creators to come on this particular platform and build their own story, build out their own inbox. So it's continuing to gain steam, gain recognition. But thank you again for your time. Here's my screen somewhat stuck here. Just trying to move. Okay. So closing it out, everybody who attended and registered will receive a copy of the recording and the slides used. And within the slides, you'll actually have the ability to create your own student account, which is in that hyperlink under the 3rd bullet point. So if anybody has any questions on creating a student account or piloting this experience with their students, because for the month of March, we're actually allowing free pilots for all students. Anybody who has interest or may know a colleague who may be interested in using this in their class, we're open to that and have that availability. You can reach out to me directly for that, as you can see my contact information over to the right. And if you have specific questions of the storyline or the modality, creation, backstory about this particular inbox, you feel free to reach out to Dr. Portnoy, as you can find his contact information over to the right as well. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to questions. Anybody has any questions about the inbox in general, specifically, please go ahead and enter them into the chat. I have while we're waiting for some questions to be loaded, or for you guys to start thinking about questions and inputting questions, I actually have a question that gets asked a lot of the time from professors who are interested in inbox. Dr. Portnoy, I'd love to just hear your thoughts on the question of grading this experience for your students. How do you do it, and do you have any recommendations for grading? It's, we're grading soft skills. It's sort of a self-awareness activity. How do I put a hard grade against that and fit that into the syllabus?
Sure, great question, Akil. And a very interesting one. As professors, we all struggle with what's the fairest way to grade students and to come up with a grading method that really is a reflection of what they've learned. I mean, one obvious option is to use the points that are in the inbox itself. So I use the inbox as a pre-assessment at the beginning of the course and a post-assessment literally on the last day of class. So one opportunity which I would not recommend, for example, is to take the points directly from the inbox. So let's say that for the pre-assessment, somebody gets a 20 out of 100 points, and you give them just 20, which is a failing grade? Do you wait until the end and take their post-assessment score? Do you look at the difference between their pre-assessment score and post-assessment score and calculate a percentage improvement? Those are all things that we can think about. But what I decided to do instead was simply to use the scores that they got on the inbox as a way for them to begin thinking about what they did well and what they could do even better. What are their strengths going into the course as measured by the inbox? What are the developmental needs as measured by the inbox, such that if they were high, for example, in talent development training, and low, for example, in ethics and compliance, a developmental pathway for them could be ethics and compliance. Go into the appendix, read that overview, go into the textbook, and really concentrate through the course as we cover in that topic, ethics and compliance, and then see how you did in the post-assessment. Based on what you learned then, as I mentioned before, you write a report. And the report for this particular assignment was gauged as 50 points. Everybody who wrote the report got at least 40 points. But those who really did reflection on what they learned, on what they did well, on what they could do better, a plan for improvement, and the overall value of the experience, they were graded higher towards 50 points. So that's how I decided to grade the inbox as an assignment, one assignment in the Human Resource Management course. And there are many, many other assignments.
All right, thank you for that response. We do have a question from a participant or an attendee, so I'm going to read it out to you. Do the instructor notes go into the detailed level per email/text that you provided in the CEO quote-unquote favor email, leading to the best response?
No, I do not provide any of that information in the inbox itself. That was really for our time together to give you background as to what's going on in the framework of the inbox. But the students are really left to their own to do the interpretation of what's behind each one of those options and develop a conclusion as to which would be the best response. Now, the time pressure itself may lead them to go down the line and look for one that seems most obvious to them. But the student who's really trying to learn, the student who's really trying to develop critical thinking, will take a look at each one of those. If I, for example, going to the example with the deacon, if I choose to send this off to the director of talent acquisition, the director of talent development, what would the outcome of that be? What would the benefit be of taking that particular route? Is that really going to be in line with our human resources policies and procedures? How would the CEO feel about that? How would I feel about that? What might the outcome be? So hopefully what we're doing is giving students an opportunity to walk through the pathway of critical thinking to develop a response that's going to be best reflective of human resources as a profession. I want to make sure that addressed your question. If not, I'll be happy to try again.
All right, so we have another question coming up. My undergraduate students are migrating toward Instagram, texting, and other technologies. Corporations are still heavily dependent on email. What do you recommend to engage students to develop email skills?
Boy, that's an interesting question. How do you develop email skills? There are opportunities for developing those skills that I found on LinkedIn, through LinkedIn Learning, through Google searches. But I would say the professor and student approach interacting with one another would be a great way of doing that. And if that's something that any of us would want to pursue, I think a good way of doing that would be to develop some assignments in class to try out different emails and to work with each other and give each other feedback on email skills, really with the oversight of the professor as a coach and as a mentor, helping to really show what emails that are effectively written can accomplish versus those that potentially can cause an email storm with lots of unwanted correspondence could potentially result in. So I don't have a course that I can refer you to, but if that's something that you would want to talk about offline, let's put our heads together and come up with a way of really developing a creative assignment that might do that. I would welcome that opportunity.
All right. And then we did get a response from the question asked in the first question asked by the participant of thank you. But we have a following question. I teach talent management in an MBA program. The prerequisite is HR management. I would like to use this inbox at the beginning of the course, but do you think it would be too basic? Again, my subject is talent management, but the text addresses most of these Capsim topics from a more the organizational perspective.
So my response to that is, why not create a general practitioner set of competencies first that spans across the entire range of human resources? So whether or not we judge any of these scenarios as basic is subject to, I think, some interesting discussion that we could have. But again, they're based on actual experiences. They're based on careers that were made, careers that were ruined, careers that flourished, careers that didn't. And so there are the vestiges within these 30 items, along with the chat or instant messages, that can really spawn a lot of discussion. And following, even if we're focusing on talent acquisition or talent development, it would make, I think, for some interesting discussion following the inbox as to what is the best response? Why is it the best response? What could happen if you chose other responses? I'm teaching remotely, and so if I were doing that, I would put people in breakout rooms of 4 or 5 and say, hey, compare how you each responded to these items and talk about why you chose those particular responses. And now that you know the correct responses are the best responses, why do you think they're the best responses? And where are they really drawing from in terms of HR core functions? What a great way to provide a foundation for MBAs or master's degree people who are specializing in one area than to have a good solid foundation in the entire field of HR.
All right, thank you for that answer. So next question, we have a couple more coming in still. So this one reads, this is great. I have a question about the pre/post assessment approach. I'm currently using this inbox in my HR classes and with the hopes of measuring a knowledge acquisition over the course of the semester. I was told I didn't sign up for that option. If I share this inbox with my colleagues or adopt this inbox again, what do I need to do to ensure my students have, oh, this is more so a pre and post, this is more of an administration question for me. That is within the setup. When you're launching a new course, you'll have the option, and actually know this, the person that's asking this question directly, so I can actually respond directly. But this is more of a setup in the course. How do I set this up to be a pre/post option for my students? So when you come to the shopping cart, when launching a new course, you choose the inbox that you'd like to work with. So you click on human resources. It will give you the option of either one or two. It will give you a drop down of, do I want one experience or two experience? And you just drop down to two experiences. And on the administrative end, you have the option of setting the dates of the first or the pre-test, and then the dates of the post-test. So that's something I can definitely follow up or call support. You can support at capsim.com. Call us up when setting up your classes and just mention that you would like to set this up as a pre/post experience for your students, and we'll walk you through that. But that's sort of a high level overview of that answer. But thank you again for that question. The
And
next,
Akil, if I
go
could
ahead.
here, I am an avid supporter of the Capsim support function. They respond very quickly, they respond in detail, and they just do a great job. So I encourage you to reach out to them.
Yeah, that's something I didn't mention in your introduction, that you're a Capsim advocate. You've been with Capsim prior to building this experience out with the Capsim Inbox platform. You've been familiar with our solutions for a while now. So yes.
Actually, another course that I teach is business fundamentals for non-business students. And we have professors come in from each one of the major business topics, whether it's statistics or marketing or data analysis. And our challenge was to be able to integrate those topics in a meaningful way, because the professors would come in, deliver 4 lectures, leave, the next professor would come in. So we turned it to Capsim, and we're using what's called Foundations, which is a business simulation where students actually are in companies that compete with one another to make decisions in launching their product. And that's how I really became aware of Capsim, and it's just been a tremendous success in helping us integrate the business topics in our classes. That's why Capsim reached out to me to go further and develop this HR inbox, because of our history together.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Yeah, thank you for that content. I appreciate that. Expanding on that. A second question from an attendee. Second question, how do I explain the value of the HR inbox to students who aren't HR majors or those that don't have an interest in an HR career? They're taking the course as a degree plan requirement. So yeah, they may be in general business administration or down the marketing track, but they're taking an organizational behavior class or HR management course. How do I make that connection?
So Akil, I'm conscious of our time here, so I'm going to answer the question in a brief way, and if anybody
Mhm.
wants to follow up, I'd be happy to do that. So let's think about HR as an integral part of a business. And now let's take the HR function away and think about a manager who is faced with making decisions that have potential unintended consequences. What if they choose somebody that um, perhaps shows favoritism without realizing it? What if they choose somebody that perhaps could show potential, um, let's say, discriminatory intent or discriminatory outcome? What if they choose a compensation that is clearly unfair and violates the Equal Pay Act. There are all kinds of unanticipated consequences that could happen in business if managers, supervisors make decisions without having a good solid understanding of HR. That's what this inbox can help provide for them, is the understanding, the foundation of what human resource management is all about, and its strategic and tactical importance to the success and growth of a company.
All right, thank you for that answer. And with that, we will close this out. If you have any follow-up questions regarding possibly setting up a pilot, you can contact me. If you have any more questions about the context or content of the HR inbox, you can reach out to Dr. Portnoy. And Dr. Portnoy, thank you again for making time to speak with us. I'd like to also thank all of the attendees for taking time out of their day in the middle of the week to learn more about Capsim, learn more about CapsimInbox. So yeah, thank you guys.